All right, welcome back to Served. As promised, try to find a couple of people who are probably smarter on this issue than I am. That is always the goal. We're all allowed our opinions. I prefer ones that are probably responsibly studied. I think one of my favorite stats of the year, and I guess I'll call it a tennis stat, is that the ITIA in Australia said, hey, let's have an open forum for players. I know there are a lot of questions about what's going on, a lot of concerns. There are a lot of opinions. Everyone seems to agree that confusion is rampant about the way we do things. I'll answer anything. The CEO goes, I'll answer anything you want. Come. Exactly one player showed up to ask questions, and that's who we have on the show today, Chris Eubanks, friend of the show. Welcome back. Chris, I hate vague questions, but I'm going to do it. What's your take on the lawsuit of things? How are you digesting it? What do you like? What do you disagree with?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on again, guys. It's always fun to talk to you guys. So I got lucky in Indian Wells because in passing, a player mentioned to me that they heard that something big like a lawsuit was going to be coming. I didn't think that much about it. I go, okay, I feel like for the past few years we've heard a lot of um, something's coming from the PTPA side, and it hasn't really come about any big substantial change or news. It's some good stuff. I think that they've broadcast there, especially in regards to the ITIA stuff, like their fund that they're starting and
That's awesome.
different things, but nothing huge. So when I heard about it, and it was with a friend in passing, was like, "Have you heard what that apparently something big is coming with the PTPA?" I go, "Okay, sure, we'll hear about it when we hear about it. Whatever it is, it'll be interesting." So then fast forward to Miami, all of a sudden the news breaks, the lawsuit. And so I go, oh, now, okay, now we're starting to get some real big news is starting to happen. So I was eager to open find the pages, open the lawsuit and kind of read about it just to see, you know, what was being said, what was being alleged, what I know, and just kind of compare my experiences with a lot of the things that they're saying. And my first reaction when I began reading through the lawsuit was similar to Novak. I thought the language was a bit strong. Um, I think Novak had a similar quote, and I completely agree with it. I was like, man, this is some really strong language. And then as I continued to read through it, I was a bit torn because I think there were some good points that were being made that I thought and I kind of agreed with. But I also thought that there were some points that I thought were a bit misleading. And granted, this is based on I'm a college dropout. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but just based on experiences that I had with certain things that they spoke about, I thought that maybe they didn't tell the full story in the way that they were talking about it. And I thought that they maybe misled with some of the language that they used. I have a couple examples. And I know a lot of it relates with the ITIA because over the past 12 months, as you talked about at the beginning, like
Yeah.
I've really started to study up on the ITIA process and
Yeah. I want to
how
hear
things work.
I want to hear the specific examples you give. I think, can we all just level set here before we get into like the issues we have with it? We all want more prize money for players, right? But we have to deliver that in a responsible way. The fact that the slams give 15% of total revenue to players is laughable, right? 100% of tennis earth. Actually, sorry, I don't want to do the same thing where I say I'm representing everyone when I'm not. 100%. Most of tennis earth can easily agree that the schedule can't be 11 months. That we can't have 5 days between sanctioned events for 2024 and 2025 between next gen finals and when United Cup starts, right? So let's just agree on the most sane parts of what they said, which is pointing out problems that people largely know exist, right? And then also we have I have an issue, and we'll get into it, but like using words like anytime a lawsuit starts with rigged in the first sentence, one, you're not setting yourself up for victory because that's about 0-67 in the last 5 years. But like, cartel, draconian, like all of this language is extreme. It's like I don't know that you would accuse your worst enemies of that. And we're supposed to kind of all be together in tennis. So we agree on the macro points, issues, and the fact that the ATP needs to actually act with a sense of urgency sometimes instead of in self-protection. I think that goes for most organizations in tennis. Good people can make bad and wrong decisions over time. Let's level set. Give us your specifics on the things that you think were, I don't want to speak for you, but I read it as some misinformation. But give us examples of, I think that's stuff that you've actually lived out in real time.
Yeah. So the first example was when the ITIA spoke, when they spoke about the ITIA's role, they gave a list of examples that paints the ITIA as a super overly harsh, quote, heavy-handed agency. I can't speak to every example that they use. They talked about Marco Trungelliti, which I don't know anything about, so maybe they have everything right there. I don't know. The first one that I know a little bit about was the Mensik mid-match drug test. The lawsuit claims that during the ATP Next Gen Finals, Mensik was, quote, forced to undergo a mid-match drug test, and because he was, quote, clearly affected by it, he lost the match. I called that match for Tennis Channel. Mensik was playing Feast in their last round-robin match at the Next Gen Finals. He loses the first 2 sets to Feast. He takes a toilet break. He goes off the court. This is where me as a player, what I'm assuming, I have to assume as well, what happened was the person who meets you after your match to take you to the doping control room is usually a local person. They don't work for the ITIA. They're a regional person that their job is, when Jakub Mensik finishes his match, if you have the clipboard and it says you test Jakub Mensik, once he finishes his match, you have to notify him that you were there to follow him until he's ready to give his sample, and then you bring him to the doping control room where they then meet an ITIA doping control officer, and that's where the officer takes over. The person who's been walking, I'm sure you know it, Andy, they walk around with you. You'll see it actually at the U.S. Open. When players lose on Ash and they walk through the tunnel,
Yep.
A lot of times there's a person who stands back with a clipboard. They walk past, the player walks past them, and then the player goes and they follow them, because usually it's a player who's lost the match.
So
they don't really want to be talked to.
This is like any other job on earth where you get hired for a week of your time to kind of learn a new job, and you have, a simplistic task in theory. Are you going to say they just made a mistake when Mensik walked off the court and they thought he was finished with the match?
100%. 100% is my assumption. He walked off the court, went into a toilet break. The person probably saw him and said, "Hey, you have a doping test." Mensik goes, "Absolutely not. I'm not doing a doping test. I'm in the middle of a match." And then walks out. He is frustrated. He is clearly frustrated. He goes onto the court. He goes to the chair umpire. I think it was Nacho Forcadell who was the chair umpire. He tells him, They just tried to get me to do a doping test in the middle of a match.
Which
Nacho's
he's right
confused.
about. Mensik's 100% right about that.
He's 100% right.
Yeah.
And Nacho goes, "What?" He goes, No, that's wrong. We'll take care of it. We'll talk to him." Nacho then tells the, I think the tournament soup or ref what goes on the walkie-talkie. He's kind of confused. And then Mensik goes on, he finishes the match. But the issue I had was the wording of it. He wasn't forced to do a doping test. And at the end, they used that clearly affected by it. He lost the match. Mensik is a great player.
No offense to Arthur Feast, by the way.
Yeah. Like Mensik is a great player. Don't get me wrong. He was down 2 sets to love. He took a toilet break. He wasn't playing the best in Next Gen. I think he was battling some injury. He hadn't won a match. So again, they're using terminology that I think kind of leads the reader to believe, this heavy-handed organization, they trying to force players to do things against the rules, which to my understanding, I don't think that's what really happened. I think someone messed up in their job, and that's what happened. So that was the first thing that I thought was a bit odd. The second one, I think they misrepresented a rule regarding meat contamination. So in line, I think it was 252. They said, I actually have the quote, "As the governing body defendants know, the meat eaten in Colombia often causes positive false tests in player samples because of the way the cattle is farmed." That is 100% true. And then they go, "Yet it is impossible for the ITIA to determine a positive test or whether a positive test came from meat or a banned substance." I can't speak on that. I would think the science would determine whether or not it came from contaminated meat or a banned substance. But again, we're getting too technical. I'm not going to pretend to know. So I'm just going to say, okay, let's fair. This is the problem I have with it. The next line goes, "Anytime a positive test occurs in a player sample," then they go in parentheses, "regardless of the reason, the ITIA automatically implements a provisional ban on the player, preventing them from playing." That is not true.
It's not true.
I know that for a fact. It's not true. It's not regardless of the reason. The ITIA has a list of, I believe, 3 countries: Mexico, China, and Guatemala. They have a list of 4 prohibited substances that they are aware. They notify, they send it out to I don't know if they send it to the players, but it's published on the website that in these 3 countries, if you test positive for one of these 4 banned substances and it's under a certain threshold, you will not be provisionally suspended. That is written online. You can find it.
And just for context, there have been tournaments where people have been eating room service, and you'll have 42 players popped for the same thing. And they test negative the week before and the week after, and they happen to be in one of the regions that you just mentioned, Chris. So, 100%. regardless of reason, seems like a dumb thing to want. I think reason should matter.
My thing was too. There was no reason to add that in there. If you read the quote without the regardless of the reason, it goes, anytime a positive result occurs in a player's sample, the ITA automatically implements a provisional ban on the player. If you take out the regardless of the reason, I can kind of go with the rule, because you're not being overly specific. You're just saying that if a positive test comes back, you have a provisional suspension. Okay, sure. But when they added the regardless of the reason, I was like, well, that's just not true, because there's a whole separate set of rules and issues that address that exact concern. So again, I had a problem with that, because I felt like that was just an unnecessary phrase that almost leads the reader to think something that it really didn't need. So again, I had a bit of an issue with that. We don't have to get all the way into it. I think the third one, I have 4 total. The third one was the wording, and I thought the misrepresentation in the Sinner case. Yeah, no surprise there. It was like they talked about, after giving examples of the ITIA being super strict and harsh with athletes, they represent the facts of the Sinner case in a way that doesn't accurately tell the full process. And so in that line, I have some quotes on it, but it goes, the ITIA proved in August 2024 that its heavy-handed approach is arbitrary and selective. Again, no, it wasn't. That month, the ITIA announced that Jannik Sinner, the top-ranked player on the ATP Tour, had twice tested positive for banned steroid earlier that season. And then this is when it starts to get weird. It goes, unlike its dogged pursuit of other players, however, it accepted Sinner's explanation that his physical therapist had accidentally applied a banned substance to Sinner's skin during treatment. As a result of its immediate acceptance, the ITIA concluded that Sinner bore no fault, no negligence for his positive test, and permitted him to compete in the 2024 U.S. Open, which Sinner won. So again, they want to throw the result in there at the end for a specific reason, I think. But the issue I had was they talked about, because of its immediate acceptance. His explanation was not immediately accepted. It was accepted to lift the provisional suspension, and the next, 4 or 5 months, the actual case took place.
Also minor detail, he's currently suspended.
And he's currently suspended. He's currently suspended.
Yeah.
So again, it was like they misrepresent the facts and saying, like, because of its immediate, and again, it was unnecessary. You didn't have to add it in there. And I'm reading it again with the knowledge that I have, and I go, that's not exactly how it worked. There wasn't an immediate acceptance. The immediate acceptance came in the emergency appeal to lift the provisional suspension. Once that was lifted, that just simply allowed him to continue to play while the case went on, and it went on for months. And then they went through the proper course of action. That final Cincinnati happened. It came out the next day. There were months in between the due process of that case, and they don't represent it that way.
There's also sense. So even if you're, the laziest and you don't care about, facts over feelings, they're not doing him any favors by announcing this whole process the Monday of U.S. Open practice week. If you're trying to protect 100%. Someone, if there's this whole cartel of people trying to protect one player over another, that's literally probably the worst day that you could announce it.
1,000%.
Yeah. Anyways, what's your fourth one, Chris? Or are you?
No. So the last one I had, and this is something that I've had personal experience with. So and I'm sure you know it, Andy. They talk about the 1 week or the 1 event per week rule, and I think it was on line 207. This is the only part of the ATP that I actually know about, because I'll be honest, for the first vast majority of years of my career, I didn't care to understand how the ATP really worked that much. I would go to player meetings. I would sit through it. I was like a normal player. I need to win more matches. That's where my focus was. So I didn't really care to. But this is one of the rules that I actually have experience with. I think it was on line 207. It says the rules restricting player participation in conflicting events also preclude players from enrolling in exhibitions or unsanctioned tournaments if he or she has been eliminated in the early rounds of the tournament on the tours. And then they give an example about if you lose in the Open, you can't compete the second week of the Open and an exhibition in Madison Square Garden. So that rule is written, and it does work like that.
Which, by the way, Madison Square Garden wouldn't do because they have a caveat. I've played at Madison Square Garden. You're not allowed to play within like the way the Exos work, within like a 250-mile radius, because they don't want to compete for whatever. So Madison Square Garden wouldn't have that. They actually have a rule. They have a rule that you can't play within a certain amount of geography within a certain amount of time, maybe 3 months on either side of their big event. So that's just bullshit on its face. It's like talking about Peter Pan and the Easter Bunny.
Yeah, I thought it was a bad example. But the rule of how it restricts, you cannot, if you were to lose early in the tournament, you can't go play another tournament. That's what the rule says. What they're not telling you, though, is players can go to the tournament referee, ask for a release, and then most times they're granted that release and they're allowed to go play in another event. I had a personal experience with it. I believe in 2019, I played Atlanta. I played singles. I lost in doubles. This is at the time, too, when World Team Tennis was played in the summer. So I lost in doubles. I think the Philadelphia Freedoms needed a sub. My agent calls me. He goes, "Hey, World Team Tennis, we have a World Team Tennis offer. Philly Freedoms, they need an alternate, someone to just substitute for a match or two. Would you be interested?" I'm out of Atlanta. I'm like, "Sure, let's do it." I don't get released by the tournament because I don't know that I'm supposed to. I go on, I play the fill-in match in World Team Tennis. I then go to DC that next week, and one of the ATP supervisors pulls me aside. He goes, "Hey, we know you play World Team Tennis. If that happens, you need to come to the tournament referee to get a release because you're not allowed to play another unsanctioned event during the week in which you are committed to our event, even if you lose." So I didn't know that. I go, "Oh, I had no idea. In the future, I'll just come to the referee." And I think another instance did happen where I had to do this and I knew exactly what to do. I went to the referee. I said, "Hey, this opportunity came up. Can I get a release?" I think the reason the rule is there, to my understanding, is they don't want players, for one, double dipping, but two, sacrificing the quality of the sport in their event to go and take a bag somewhere else, which makes sense. Well, it makes logical sense.
Like in every other part of Earth, like I do a lot of work for JP Morgan and Chase at the US Open. I have for a long time. And so generally there's language when I'm working for you for those 2 weeks, I also, can't put up a billboard talking about my support for Truist. Like that's just a normal kind of practice. If you have you can't go wear another brand. Like that's just, you opt into certain things. It means that, there's an opportunity cost potentially somewhere else. But what you're saying is that more often than not, rational thought, they listen, they don't want you to not go make a dime playing for Philly. Like that doesn't affect them at all at that point in your career. It's not as if, it's not as if you're losing the guy at that point who's 3 in the world and all of a sudden, he's double dipping, or you feel like he's not trying in Atlanta to go get this other thing. That's what the rule's written for, but that's not how it's applied.
Yeah, they don't want players to tank in the ATP event to go and do something else because that obviously it's bad. It's a bad look on the tour. It's a bad look on the tournament. The thing so in terms of protecting the integrity of the game, I completely understand the rule. But again, they don't tell you that if you you go to the referee's office, the referee knows you didn't tank, and you say, "Hey, this opportunity came up. Can I get a release to go?" From my understanding, more times than not, they're going to grant that release. The thing that I thought they could have, and I thought would have made a better point, was one thing that they do, and the deadlines for the tournament, for these ATP events, a lot of times are 6 weeks out. You can't enter it and withdraw and then go play another event. To me, that would have a stronger case, because if I don't want to sacrifice the quality of the event, I don't want to tank, I don't want to whatever. If I just want to withdraw from the tournament, I have a certain amount of withdrawals a year. If I want to use that withdrawal and say, "You know what, I don't want to play whatever Atlanta because this opportunity came up. I entered Atlanta 6 weeks ago. Well, 4 weeks out from Atlanta, I get a notice of, or hey, would you want to do this thing instead?" I can't, because I'm already on the Atlanta list. What I would have liked to have seen, maybe if we can withdraw and still go and play something else, that's different than tanking in your match or losing and then quickly saying, "Hey, can you sign this release so I can do another event?" I'm like, okay, I could see that rule. They would have, I would think, a stronger case if they were saying players can't even withdraw because these tournaments the deadlines are so far out, you have to commit to it. But then a better opportunity could come up 3 weeks out and you're stuck committed to the ATP event. I'm like, okay, I can kind of see that one. But the example that they used, I was like, well, this just, for one, this just wouldn't happen. And two, you can get a release from the referee to go play in other events. And I think a lot of players have done that in the past.